Hey everybody, Dylan Reich here. Happy New Year. This is my first video for the year, another lesson for you. Back in my last video, I did ask if there's anything you'd like me to talk about or any topics you'd like me to cover. And a couple people did say they'd like me to talk about arranging a popular song for the guitar and how I might go about doing that. So, ask and you shall receive. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is a song. So I chose Eternal Flame by the Bangles. I love the Bangles. So this goes back to 1989, this song. You might remember it. If you don't know it, go check it out and meet me back here. All right, quick note before we get started. Everything we're going to talk about here is totally subjective. There really are no rules. I'm just going to go through this process and talk about some of the decisions I'm going to make and maybe why I've made them, and to give you some ideas of things to put into your arrangements. But none of this is stuff you quote unquote have to do, right? Every song is different. Every musician is different. Every context is different. There's so much variety, right? This is just a guide. All right, so having got that out of the way, let's talk about this song, Eternal Flame. We're in the key G major. So what I want to do first is I want to boil this song right down to its most core, foundational elements. The melody, the harmony, and the rhythm. Okay, melody, harmony, rhythm. Now, if you don't know what those words mean, melody, in our case here, is the bit that you sing, right? The notes that the singer is singing. Okay, it is not always singing. It very often is. It could be a piano, it could be a saxophone, it could be a keyboard. In our case, the melody is carried by the lead vocal, so that's what I'm concerned with. That's our melody. So I want to figure out what that is. Okay, you can see on the screen, I've kind of written out a small lead sheet, I would call this, which is the basic gist of a song. It's kind of a plain Jane version of a song. It's meant to be open to interpretation so that the musicians, the band, whoever can interpret it in whichever way they like. But you can see I've got the melody. Now, you do not have to literally write it out like this in notation. You could just do this in your head. This is just for demonstration purposes. So I've got my melody, right? I know what it is, whether I've written it down or I just know it in my head. Okay, that's my melody. The other thing I want is the harmony. Harmony means the chords, the chord progression. What is it? So if you were singing this song, or if somebody was singing it and you were going to say strum chords along, what chords would they be? Right? So you want to listen to your song and figure it out. Or maybe you can find the chords somewhere. Right? So in our case, if you go back to our lead sheet here, I've written the chords up the top. So I've got G, E minor, C, D, and etc., etc. Okay? So I've got my melody. I've got my harmony. These are the main ingredients of this song, of a lot of songs, really. Okay, we're boiling it down. We're stripping away all the production and all the bells and whistles, and at its very core, we've got these chords and we've got this melody. So have a listen. If I just play, like for that chord progression we have, if I just play root notes, right? So for every G chord, I'm just going to play a G. For every E minor, I'm just going to play an E. For every C, I'm going to play a C, etc. It sounds like this. I'll play root notes and the melody goes like this. It already sounds like the song, right? May as well keep going. Almost there. Okay, so you can tell just by playing the root note of a chord and the melody, I'm already pretty much in the ballpark of playing this song, okay? Because these are the main ingredients. All right, so before I go too deep into figuring out, the bass line and the fingerings and all this stuff, I want to just take a second to think about the song, right? Because the whole process here boils down to, what do you want it to sound like? Where do you want to take it? What's your vision? What picture are you trying to paint, right? It all comes down to your taste. You're the musician. We want to hear what you have to say, right? For me, this song is all about the melody. Okay, I think of this as a 10 out of 10, A1 level melody. Shout out Billy Steinberg, Tom Kelly, Susanna Hoffs, who wrote this song. I'm sure they're all watching this video, of course, right? Those are three heavy hitter songwriters, and they did a great job here. So this is a great melody. And to me, the melody and the lead vocal is the star of the show, okay? So the bass line and the other chords and chord tones and things, that stuff's important, but to me, for this song, that is the scenery, the background, and the melody is really the main focus. And again, so my take on this is the melody is so good, I just really want to play it pretty straight and kind of stay out of the way, okay? So I'm thinking about things like phrasing and articulation. So let me take a line for you. Let's demonstrate something. What about this line here? Am I only dreaming? These are the notes. Okay, so those are the right notes. But does that sound the way you want it to sound? We could play it there, or maybe you want to play it up here, or maybe somewhere else. Maybe we want to go hammer on, pull off, slide, right? Dynamics. Maybe you want one note louder than another. Maybe you want hammer on, staccato, which is a very short note. Maybe two of them. Maybe you want to go hammer on, slide, slide, something like that. Let's try that. Maybe you want to overlap these notes. Harmonic. What else could we do? Maybe, we can do, there's almost limitless amounts of ways you can approach any given phrase. Okay, so there's not really a right or wrong answer. It just comes down to what do you want? What do you want it to sound like? And like I said before, I really just, to me, that's too much. Right? I want to retain the intimacy of that lead vocal and the purity of this melody because I already think it's great. And like I said before, I want to stay out of the way. I would prefer myself and the listener be drawn into this great song and this great melody and forget that I'm even part of the story. Forget that I'm even there, right? So that's where I'm going to take it. I'm going to play it very straight. All right, so we've got our melody. We've given it some thought to how we're going to phrase it and what vision we have for this song. Now we want to flesh it out a little bit. So before we had root notes of the chords. Okay, we can add other notes that don't always just have to be the root notes. We can add other chord tones. So if you don't know what that means, chord tone literally just means the notes that are in the chord. So our first chord is a G. The notes of a G major chord are G, root note, B, the third, and D, the fifth, G, B, D. So any one of those notes is a note that's part of that chord. That is a chord tone. So I could maybe go G to D, right? And then E minor. I could do an E to another E. That's 2 root notes, or maybe a B. So think of something like that. So G, E minor, C, D. Those are just chord tones, notes of those chords. And I'm playing quarter notes here. Let's try that with the melody, see how that works. Right? Pretty good. Now, sometimes, you know, having that consistent rhythm of that quarter note, I'm kind of liking that because it does have that sort of hypnotic, repetitive effect, right? You just get locked into that. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And I think that might suit this song well. I'm probably not going to do it 100% of the time, but I will add some of that in. I do kind of like that. Okay, so just chord tones, right? So think of chord tones, notes that are part of the chord. Another thing we can add are passing tones, passing notes. So that last phrase I just played, right? The chords go from D major to E minor. So if I was playing the root notes of the chord, I'm literally just playing D and then E. I'll play it one more time. Right? D, E. Okay, so a passing note is literally when I am going from one note to another and I play another note along the way, right? So in this case, it's pretty easy. There's only actually one note in between these two. It's this one, D sharp. So instead of just going straight to the E, I can go, and it'll sound like this. Sorry. One more time. I think I want to play it up here, but the same exact notes. D, D sharp, E. Often the passing note will be a note that's part of the key. In this case, it's a chromatic passing note. So we're outside the key and we're moving in half steps. Right? There's another thing we can add in. Another thought about the chord tones is you're going to have to think about which chord tones do we use, right? The short answer, it's up to you. You can use as many or as few as you like. But of course, that's not entirely helpful to say that. So let me give you a little bit of guidance here. In this context, which is one instrument, and I'm sitting by myself playing a fingerstyle guitar arrangement, the root note becomes much more important, right? When you're playing with other people, a piano player, a bass player, the root note becomes less important because somebody else could be playing it. So you don't need to always play it. But in this context, it is kind of important. So I am leaning on those root notes, right? As for the other notes, it's really up to you. I'm thinking of just, look, you can boil it down to just which one you like the sound of. Try a couple of them and see which one you like the sound of. Probably the simplest way to explain it. But also, I kind of want to stay out of the way of that melody. I don't want to, if I jump too close to that melody, it might interfere, it might not. It's all up to you. But use your ears, use your judgment, and you want to keep the melody being the melody. So I'm thinking about stuff like that. So when I was doing this, I had, in some cases, I was only playing root notes, like an octave apart, E and E. And for C, I was playing a C and a G, so, but I could probably play an E. You could try them both. Let's try it. Let's try it right now. That's me playing the G in this bass line. Let me try the E instead. I preferred the first one, but you may prefer something different. That's the beauty of it. The other thing is that if you really want to outline the character and personality of a chord, you often are going to need the third of the chord, right? And here's the thing, like here, remember you were like, but Dylan, you didn't play the third of that G, but the third was in the melody. It's the first note. That's the third, right? Right, so sometimes there's a, the melody actually has those chord tones in there as well. So you can take that into account. But I'm thinking specifically about this part of the song right here where there's an A7 chord, right? So remember we talked about this line before. Am I only dreaming? So if I play Am I only, that's this line. I'll play with an open string. That's my melody, right? And if I put a root note underneath it, in this case it's my A, it sounds perfectly nice. Right? That's nice. But if I really want it to sound like A7, which I do, I'm going to have to play a C sharp, which is the third of that chord. Right? The third of the chord is the one that makes it sound major or minor or even dominant, depending on the seventh. But right now, it's not really minor or major. It's just an A something or other. You've got the seventh in there in the melody, right? But listen to the difference when I hit that C sharp in there. Right? And all of a sudden, the personality of that chord jumps out to you. Right? Because that C sharp is important to get the sound of A7, but that C sharp is also outside of this key of G major, which means it's one of those notes that makes you go, ooh, that's different. Okay, we call this kind of chord, that A7, in this context, we call it a secondary dominant. If you care about the fancy music jargon, that's what that is. Right? So you got to give some thought to those chord tones, and you can try out different ones and see which ones you like. All right, I had a thought for this last section here, these last two measures. I'll play you what I was thinking. This is one more time. And I want to just tell you a little bit about this, because this first chord, if you look at the entirety of this chord I'm playing, like that, this is an A minor 11 chord. This D on top of here, that's an 11th. Now, I want to bring this up because this is something that comes up again and again when I'm teaching, is people will ask me, how did you think of this chord? How did you come up with this chord? And how did you come up with that shape? And how did you do this and that? You don't necessarily have to be thinking, I will now play an A minor 11 chord, right? What this is remember those two things, harmony, melody. So our harmony was A minor 7, and the melody is D. You put them together, and overall you get that minor 11 sound, but really it's just A minor 7 and a D note, right? So like I said before, sometimes people will ask me, how'd you get this chord and how'd you get this shape? And the answer is, I was just playing the melody. I just have a melody and I just put that note in with the rest of the chord. That's it, you know? So it ends up looking from a distance, if you're not thinking harmony, melody, if you're just thinking the whole thing, from a distance, it kind of looks much more complicated, right? But when you break it down, oh, it's just a melody going along, and this is what's underneath it. It becomes a lot more manageable when you can break your thinking into those two parts, okay? So I just wanted to mention that. So I went from there to here, and you might think, well, how'd you get to this one? This is an inversion of the chord we just played, right? The notes of this chord, G, C, D, and the notes of this one, G, C, D. It's a different inversion, right? Which means it's just the same notes flipped around. Like we've taken the bottom note from this one and put it up the top. And why did I put it up the top? Because that is the melody note. The melody goes like this. Right? That's the melody. So I'm just following along with the melody. Okay? Then my next part, where it goes to D. Now, did you catch what I did there? I'm going to teach you all these fancy music words, right? What I did there is called contrary motion. All this stuff sounds much more complicated than it really is. So let me explain. Motion, okay? When I'm talking about similar motion, it's when you have two voices, 1, 2, and they move together. So one goes up, the other one goes up, one goes down. They just move like this. In this case, an example would be if I played this melody and underneath it I went, it heads, they're in the same direction. Right? Do, 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 do. They move like that. Contrary motion, and there's not one is not better than the other, they're just different. So if you want some contrast, you can do some of one, some of another. It's up to you. But contrary motion is where you have one voice goes one way, the other voice goes another way. So they might go from here to there. So that's what I did. The melody goes up. So I went down for some contrast. Together, it sounds like that. Put a bass note under it. And this adds the 7th, which kind of gives you that, the pull, and it gives you more momentum towards the G major, which is where we're starting again. Right, so do you feel that by adding this 7th, it's kind of like a magnet pulling us back to that G major chord, which is where we're starting. All right, let's go through what we've got so far for our tune. So we've got our melody, and underneath it, remember, just chord tones, nothing else. Chord tones, melody. I like to do that. I like, when we talked about phrasing, I like that slide. Play the G up here. Remember that was our passing note? D, D sharp, E. Again, melodies up here. These notes. Just E minor, E, G, B, chord tones, that's it. Just quickly, there, that slide that I did, not much in the bass line, but this song does have a fretless bass in it. So I'm not playing the exact bass line of the original song, but think of that as a homage to that awesome fretless bass that's in the original song. That sound of the boom, boom. I'm trying to emulate the fretless bass there. Remember that? C sharp along with this note in the melody, this G, you put them together and we get that A7 that's resolved when we hit up here, D. And again, there's our melody. This note is just a chord tone. It's an F sharp, it's just part of D. That's all that is. So B minor, 7. And there's that part we talked about, that minor 11 sound. Inversion. Adding the 7th, little contrary motion. Resolving back. Let me play that again for you without talking all the way through it. And so on and so on. All right, just before we wrap it up, I do have a couple of extra bonus tips for you. Now, this might seem like a more advanced concept, especially if you're just starting out, but even if you are new at doing this, I do want to kind of put this thought in your head so that it's rolling around in the back of your mind as you're going along your musical journey. And that is, music is more than just about playing the notes. Right? It's not just, is it a G or a B or these words we say, a minor 11 or a D or all that stuff. And it's more than just like put my finger there, pluck the string, right? We want to tell a story, communicate something, express something, paint that picture, take yourself and take the listener on a journey. So when you think about the essence of this song, or whatever song you're working on, what do you want to say with it? To me, I know I said this before, but the intimacy of this lead vocal and the melody, to me, are the most important things about this song. And when you, like, if you look at these lyrics, the opening line, close your eyes, give me your hand, do you feel my heart beating? Okay, so think about this song. Intimacy, vulnerability, and put yourself in that moment where you're going to let your guard down and let yourself feel vulnerable to somebody that you care about. Like, what does that feel like, and what does that, in our case, kind of sound like? How can we communicate that? Like, imagine, if it helps you, maybe imagine that that's a movie scene and you're going to score the music to that scene, right? We can use dynamics, and when you're thinking about your phrasing and dynamics and rhythmic placement and all that stuff, ask yourself, keep checking in, like, how does it make you feel? Is it painting the picture that you want? Like, remember in the beginning I did or something. That's cool. It's fun, but it doesn't communicate that emotional vulnerability that I like about this song, right? So can you match up what that feels like, right? In that moment, let me give you an example. Okay. If I'm going to try playing a little of this song where everything is very uniform. I'm going to try to play a lot of the notes at the same volume. We'll see what that sounds like. Okay? it's got a kind of sound to it. To me, it sounds a bit stiff and rigid, and everything is in its place, but it doesn't feel there's some kind of human element of it missing. And when you think about, like I said, that emotional, vulnerable moment, think about what that sounds like when you're in that moment. It probably doesn't sound like this, where everything is at an even controlled volume, right? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. There would be a variance in volume, right? Because there's a lot of emotion, which means there's some of it that's kind of uncontrolled. Do you know what I mean? You might rush out some words, maybe ahead of the beat a little bit. You may hesitate behind the beat a little bit. Your voice might crack a little bit, which we might play as vibrato. Put yourself in that moment and see if you can take the listener and put them in that room, right? This is the kind of stuff where you can connect more deeply with the song, with your instrument, and with your listener. You know, this can be the difference between someone thinking, oh, that's a pleasant sequence of notes, to maybe they're not thinking anything because you've reminded them of a time and place in their life or a relationship, and they're too busy lost in the song and lost in a memory and connecting with what you're doing to even think about, was that an A minor 11 or any of that stuff we talked about. Okay, so little thing to keep in the back of your mind, that what are you trying to say? What do you have to say with this song? Where do you want to take it? Okay, my next bonus tip, which is kind of related to that last tip, this might be unconventional advice. I don't know if you let me know if it's unconventional, but if this is something that you're going to do a lot of, arranging songs, I would encourage you to learn the lyrics. Now you might say, Dylan, I'm not going to sing them, so what do I care about the lyrics? Okay, one, what we just talked about, it can help you understand and connect in some way to the song. But two, it will give you some phrasing cues and some ideas. If you have the lyrics running through your head, the natural cadence of human singing and speech, you can take that and bring it into the way you phrase your melody, and it can sound much more musical and what people say lyrical, right? So when you're singing, certain words will be stressed, certain words will be not. Like, for an example, in this first verse, the line goes, give me your hand. And the give, right, is on beat 1. The next time she sings it, the line is, was meant to be, same amount of syllables, but it starts earlier. The was comes before beat 1. It says, was meant to be, and 2 actually has 2 notes to it. Was meant to be. So you can take that kind of information and put it into your version, right? This means the stresses, the natural stress of where you would sing a certain note, like was meant, it's not was meant. Was is held back, meant is a little more forward. You can take those same ideas in the dynamics and bring it into your version. Also, you can just follow along in your head with the vocals, and that means it's not going to just be a carbon copy every time. Like verse 1, I just go, verse 2, verse 3, right? Every time there's a little change to it, and it has some life, and it breathes a little bit. Okay, so there's my little bonus tips there. Learn the lyrics. I haven't done a ton of song arrangements like this, but some years back I did do a handful of them. And I can tell you that when I was doing them, I knew all the lyrics. So when I'm playing this song, I can't show you what I'm thinking, but I can tell you the lyrics to this song are going along as I'm playing, right? I am sort of trying to sing the lyrics with the guitar, right? Try that out. Well, there you go. Arranging for acoustic guitar. Let me know what you thought of this lesson and if you learned something, and specifically what part of what I talked about in this video was the most helpful. And until next time, take care.